Welcome to today's webinar in our series on the future of AI in education and training. I'm Lewis Johnson, the host of the overall series. I'm very pleased to have today with us Dr. Robert Murphy from the RAND Corporation. He is a senior policy researcher there, has a breadth of experience in technology-enabled education and also in the policy issues regarding technology and education. Has recently published a report on AI and its potential in K-12 education. He'll be telling us more about that. And I'm very pleased to have him speak today because he's the first speaker in our series who has a policy background and can talk not just about the technical issues or the curriculum issues, but also the policy issues that are raised by AI in education. And what are some of the policy issues that must be overcome before AI can fully realize its potential? So Bob, go ahead. We look forward to your talk.
Great. Thank you, Lewis. Hi, everyone. Very excited to talk to you today about new technical capabilities fueled by artificial intelligence and how these capabilities might be used to benefit teachers and students in schools around the globe. My talk today, as Lewis mentioned, is based roughly on a RAND paper I published back in January on this same topic, with some additional reflections on where I see the future of AI in education heading. A little bit of background about myself. Full disclosure, I'm not a computer science or a AI expert. I'm an applied education researcher with 20 years of experience conducting research and evaluation studies of the use of technology to support instruction in K-12, higher education, and adult education. Before we begin, I also want to share some of my basic views on the role of AI on the future of education. The first is that artificial intelligence will never replace teachers, but instead will be used most effectively within tools that will help teachers become more effective in their classroom. Nor do I think that AI is going to be a disruptive force in education the way it might be in other fields such as transportation and logistics, health diagnostics, or drug discovery. Compared to these fields, the impact of AI in education is going to be relatively modest, in my opinion, and will be limited to those activities that take advantage of what AI-based systems do particularly well. Perform relatively simple repetitive tasks and identify patterns in complex data sets. We'll talk about that a little bit more later in the webinar. However, I do believe that AI-based applications will lead to tools that will help teachers do what they do better and will someday be as commonplace in schools as Google Classroom, laptops, and the use of online instructional resources. So let's begin. Recent applications of AI, in particular the use of data-intensive statistical methods such as machine learning and deep learning, have resulted in impressive advances in the healthcare, transportation sectors, and even the home. It's impossible to read any type of media like these headlines on this slide without coming across references to how AI is transforming or will transform different fields and markets. Although a number of sectors of the economy have already been significantly impacted by advances in AI, a noted exception is education. During the rest of the seminar, I'll share with you my thoughts on the role of AI in education and where I think we're heading, including the research and policy issues that need to be addressed as we move forward. In particular, I hope the webinar will help you think about how advanced technical capabilities enabled by advances in AI might be used to augment what teachers do, make their life easier in the classroom, and their instruction more impactful. The focus of my talk, therefore, will be about augmenting teacher capacity, not replacing teachers. Here's the basic structure of today's webinar. I'll start by discussing some of the new AI-enabled technical capabilities that are being applied in fields outside of education. I'll then discuss some challenges and opportunities in education where these same capabilities might be applied to help support teachers. After some technical discussion about two different approaches to AI, I will discuss my thoughts about where I see the most immediate opportunities for AI in education. And then I will end the talk with a brief summary of some of the issues that we will need to be addressed to realize the potential for AI in education. And then we'll open it up to Q&A. I'll start by first discussing some of the newer enhanced technical capabilities that are being fueled by the application of advances in AI in other fields. As we discuss these capabilities, I'd like you to think about how these same capabilities might be adapted for uses in education settings to support teachers. The first technical capability I'll talk about is image recognition. Advances in image recognition had led to a series of applications and in some cases real breakthroughs across the healthcare, security, and transportation sectors. For example, without recent advances in image recognition technology, the recent achievements in the development of autonomous vehicles would not have been possible. The next two capabilities are related to voice or speech technologies. Advances in speech recognition have allowed for applications such as voice-based internet search, voice-based controls of products in the home, and medical diagnostics, including some preliminary research on the use of speech recognition technologies to help detect PTSD and other mental disorders. I suspect that some of you have personal experience with the use of this next one. Advanced speech-to-text applications, perhaps to dictate emails and letters with greater accuracy than ever. You'll probably have noticed, while not perfect, these applications are getting more accurate and smarter. For example, remembering prior mistakes and automatically correcting them in your future uses of the apps. This is all made possible by advances in artificial intelligence. Next, language translation and the advances in language translation apps are making it easier to travel to foreign countries without a need to master new languages. Could similar apps be used in the classroom, for example, to integrate English language learners more quickly into daily classroom life? Advances in recommendation and prediction engines have allowed these applications to move beyond the online shopping sector to more significant and potentially life-changing decision environments, such as their use to support decisions on credit risk assessment by the home loan and mortgage industry, hiring by human resource departments, and sentencing and parole decisions in the criminal justice system. Finally, use of advances in chatbot technologies have allowed many more companies to offer effective 24/7 customer service that in the past was prohibitively expensive to provide. Can virtual teacher assistants, perhaps powered by Siri or Alexa, be used in the classroom to answer student questions while teachers work on one-on-one with individual students or small groups? Well, thus far, the education landscape may be devoid of disruptive AI solutions like the examples presented here. There certainly are a range of challenges and opportunities in education that might be amenable to AI solutions. We will discuss these next. In this next part of the webinar, I present examples related to three challenges and opportunities in teachers that I believe are ripe for consideration for the application of tools and products that leverage advanced AI techniques in the enabled technical capabilities. These include differentiated instruction, assessment of complex skills, and writing instruction. The first opportunity I want to discuss is differentiated instruction. One challenge, an age-old challenge faced by many teachers in public education and school systems, is how to provide all students in their classrooms with high-quality instruction while accommodating individual student needs, including students with physical or learning needs and non-native speakers. In a typical classroom, teachers are often faced with 30 or more students with a range of academic, social skills, and learning needs. One specific opportunity might be helping teachers integrate non-native speakers in the classroom. Depending on the region of the country, teachers might have students entering in their classrooms throughout the school year who do not speak the native language. Or another opportunity might be helping schools and teachers with better ways to accommodate students in the classroom who have unique physical and learning needs. Could speech technologies, for instance, enabled by AI, help teachers with these challenges? One brief example here, this is a screenshot of the use of Microsoft translator technology, providing real-time audio captioning for the hearing impaired in a college lecture. Another opportunity might be in the assessment area. Can AI be used to help improve how and how often we assess student learning in progress, as well as the types of skills we assess? While such skills associated with social emotional learning and workplace soft skills are considered critical for life after school, these skills are complex and difficult to measure reliably, particularly with paper-pencil approaches to testing. Could AI-enabled assessment environments improve this situation? The third example of challenge in education that might be an opportunity is writing instruction. How can we increase the opportunities for student writing and feedback? Writing is a very important and complex communication skill for students and adults to master, and a very time-consuming process for teachers, particularly if they're responsible for several classes of students and want to provide each student with timely and actionable feedback on their assignments. As we will discuss later, writing instruction and the automated scoring of essay is one of the areas in education where advances in AI might have the most immediate impact, and where a lot of work is ongoing. Before I talk about some current and future trends that I see on the horizon, I want to make some brief comments about two main categories of technical approaches in AI: rule-based approaches and statistical modeling techniques. While the history of research into artificial intelligence began with the application of rule-based deterministic approaches in the 1950s, today's extraordinary advances are being powered by data-intensive statistical methods, techniques developed in the 1960s, but newly enabled by recent advances in computer hardware and software, and the commitment of funding from both the federal government and corporate America. These statistical modeling approaches include the two types of approaches that often are mentioned in most current media stories about AI: machine learning and deep learning. Next, I'll provide a brief, simplified overview of the rule-based approaches and then contrast this approach with AI approaches that use statistical modeling and algorithms. Rule-based AI was developed in the 1950s to simulate human decision-making processes and to help facilitate decision-making and planning in the military and in the mining and finance industries. These systems also became known, many of these systems also became known as expert systems. Rule-based approaches are applied in domains that have a finite number of known decision paths and can be represented in the form of a simple set of rules. The rule-based approaches require access to experts with the knowledge of the domain and the expertise, resources, and time to program that knowledge into computer code. The code is essentially a series of if-then statements. The result is a system where the logic behind the recommendations or predictions generated by the system is perfectly known. The accuracy of the predictions is dependent on the quality of the expert knowledge and the ability to represent that knowledge in software code. Almost all of today's online adaptive instructional systems started out using exclusively a rule-based AI approach. And not surprisingly, most of these systems are limited to the instruction in math and reading. These are subject areas with a validated learning theory and where there's relatively strong consensus in the expert research community about how students best acquire and become proficient at these skills and what sequence the knowledge and skills should be introduced and mastered in the classroom. This type of foundational learning theory and progressions are less well understood in other subject areas, such as the social sciences, and therefore these subject areas are less amenable to rule-based approaches. Should also mention that since math and reading are the target of state testing programs, this also contributes to the greater demand from districts and schools for math and reading interventions of this type. We'll come back to adaptive instruction systems later in the webinar. In comparison to deterministic rule-based AI, statistical AI is a better approach when the problem you are trying to solve is complex and the answer depends on tens, hundreds, or thousands of different potential variables and factors in their interactions. Examples of such domains might include weather forecasting and the need to predict the weather a week or a month into the future. Or in the case of autonomous vehicles, the problem of identifying a stop sign within a grainy video image. The statistical or algorithmic approach uses digital data available from the environment to develop the necessary decision rules through pattern recognition techniques. Thus, the data determines the rules rather than a human expert. To do so requires training the system on very large digital data sets that are hopefully representative of the target population and unbiased. These data sets may already exist or need to be created. To create these data sets from scratch can be a very expensive proposition. Existing sources of data that have been used to train statistical modeling AI systems include social media postings, internet search terms, credit reports, online shopping histories, public real estate records, and digital output from equipment or online learning platforms. Highly accurate systems can require training data sets that consist of tens of thousands to millions of records. Once trained, the system then ingests new data and make predictions informed by the models developed by the training data sets. The system also learns from the relationships in the new data and optimize its prediction models. This is the learning in machine learning. The accuracy of the decisions in such a system is highly dependent on access to and the quality of large quantities of digital data. In contrast to the rule-based systems, depending on the statistical approach used, the logic or reasoning behind the statistical AI system's predictions or recommendations might be unknowable. This lack of transparency may be an issue when the systems are supporting decisions that have significant consequences for individuals, such as the decision on whether to grant a couple a home loan or whether to grant someone parole in the criminal justice system. At the end of today's webinar, we'll return to these issues of model transparency and data bias as some of the key issues that need to be addressed by the field. While rule-based approaches to AI are important and continue to be used, for the remainder of the talk, I will mainly focus on applications that use advanced statistical modeling AI approaches to support teachers in teaching. Before jumping into current and future trends for the use of advanced statistical AI approaches in education, I first want to pause to summarize some of the topics covered in the first half of the webinar by giving you my own simple recipe for a successful application of AI in education. These are a couple of the basic requirements as I see them. First, we need to start with an important problem or opportunity that, if solved, will improve the effectiveness of teachers in teaching. We discussed some of these earlier, including reaching all students in large classrooms, assessing complex skills, and provide timely feedback on student writing. Second, developers will need access to relevant digital data sets to accurately train their AI systems. This is likely going to be one of the biggest obstacles to most developers interested in using statistical AI methods such as machine learning. During the next section, I'll present some current and future applications of AI in education in the areas that I believe show some interesting opportunities and promise, and where work is already going on in many cases. These are the 5 areas on this slide where I will provide some concrete examples. The list is not comprehensive, but represents the types of opportunities in education where available data is being leveraged or will be leveraged, I believe, to train AI systems to address important challenges in teaching. The first of these is adaptive instruction. Adaptive online platforms, as I mentioned, first arrived on the scene in the 1980s, and as mentioned earlier, previously used a rule-based AI approach almost exclusively. The goal of these systems are to differentiate instruction. And by this, I mean that the systems allow students to work through the assigned content at their own pace. The systems determine which topic a student sees next based on their prior performance in the system. Systems provide reports to teachers that help them monitor student progress and identify students who are struggling. Some of the more sophisticated systems, known as intelligent tutors, provide detailed feedback and coaching to students based on the nature of the student's misunderstandings. These platforms are mostly used as a supplemental activity in the classroom for practice or homework. Most of these systems focus on mathematics instruction and reading, as I mentioned before, and some of the sciences. A few of the vendors and organizations with widely used products in this space include the nonprofit Khan Academy, game-based Dreambox Learning, and Mathia, an intelligent tutor originally developed by the Carnegie Mellon University in the 1980s. Through the application of statistical modeling AI approaches that leverage the tremendous amount of data generated by students' interactions with the platforms, some of these vendors, including Century Tech in the UK, are implementing a hybrid AI approach, rule-based and statistical modeling, using the data generated by the platform to improve the adaptivity and effectiveness of the adaptive instructional system. And I believe more of these vendors and new developers will take this hybrid approach. The second area of applications I want to highlight were developed to support student writing instruction. An area of AI called natural language processing, which today often uses machine learning techniques, allows systems to automatically assess a student's writing on a variety of aspects, including grammatical errors, verb choices, style, and organization, depending on the system. Some systems provide a single holistic score, while others provide scores on each individual aspect and provide feedback to students. Capabilities, as I mentioned, of the systems vary by vendor. Some of the systems have been in operation since the 1990s. A couple of examples include a system developed by ETS called the E-Rater that you might have heard of, that is used to score assessments to score writing assessments that are part of high-stakes exams such as the SAT and the GRE. Another developed at the University of California, Berkeley, is WriteLab, designed to be used by high school teachers to provide students with feedback on their writing during the drafting stage. In higher education and adult corporate training, a couple other examples are systems that are enrolling large amounts of students in online courses such as Udacity, Coursera, and edX, who are using automated essays scoring to score essays from thousands of students enrolled in a single course. Automated essay scoring systems will never replace the quality of the feedback that can be provided by a good writing teacher who has the time to carefully and thoughtfully critique a student's writing. But these systems may make it possible for many teachers to assign more extended writing assignments for students with the assurance that the writing will be scored and that students will receive some form of timely feedback, often around writing style and conventions, something that may not be possible without these AI-enabled systems. The next area I want to discuss is language learning. The demand for quality English language learning and the lack of trained English teachers in places like China, Latin America, and even Spain is driving the demand for improved language learning applications. For example, one Chinese company, Lulishao, uses machine learning and data from almost 100 million users to train and improve their speech recognition technology, allowing a wide range of native Chinese speakers from different geographical regions and with different levels of proficiency to learn English at their own pace. At the same time, apps like Rosetta Stone, designed for the individual consumer, are currently being used in US schools to support spoken language development in English as second language classes, as well as world language classes. The use of language apps like Rosetta Stone in language courses is likely to increase over time, as will the accumulation of data from their uses, which can then be used to improve the performance of these apps over time. To help with teacher planning and time management, systems are also being developed to help teachers quickly find validated online content and instructional materials that are appropriate for the teacher's grade level and students. For example, IBM is currently partnering with content providers on an initiative called Teacher Advisor, using their IBM Watson technology. Another example is the nonprofit organization Guru has been vetting and archiving open instructional content and assessments since 2011 and has developed a navigation engine supported by AI to allow teachers to customize their searches to meet their particular needs. This is another area, the area of online curriculum recommendation areas that I see as ripe for the new advances in AI. The final application area I'd like to discuss are early warning systems. These are used by school systems to help identify students who are struggling and may be in jeopardy of failing or dropping out of school. The goal of these systems is to identify these students early enough in their academic careers that you can provide them the support they need and put them back on the path to completing their education. These systems are currently being used mainly at the high school level. It has been reported that a majority of high schools in the US, more than a half, are using such a system today. Many of these systems currently use a rule-based approach with simple indicators such as the amount of credits earned by a student by the end of 9th grade as their main indicator informing and flagging students in need. However, early warning systems will likely see improvements as developer and school districts leverage data from students' entire educational career, as well as data external to the systems to identify struggling students earlier and more accurately. As an example of this, student research fellows at the University of Chicago partnered with a large school district and used machine learning methods and longitudinal data going back to 6th grade to develop an early warning indicator system to predict students who are at risk for not graduating high school on time because they would either drop out or need more than 4 years to receive a diploma. The system they developed significantly outperformed the district's existing simple indicator early warning system in identifying students at risk. I want to end the webinar, at least my presentation portion of it, by saying a few words about where I believe future investments should be made in the research and policy areas to support these innovations in education. First, as AI solutions are developed and promoted, we should be investing in the research to determine the real value of these innovations for teachers and students, for whom and under what conditions. Next, to spur innovation and address the need for relevant, unbiased, large digital data sets to train and validate potential applications, we should also be investing in the identification and creation of open, shareable data sets. A few examples from fields outside of education to give you a sense of what I'm talking about here. To spur development and innovation in image recognition technology, Google has created an open image data set of 9 million images and made it available to developers. Similarly, a consortium of government and private institutions in the UK have funded the UK Biobank by enlisting 500,000 members of the general public to provide their own longitudinal health data to help support advances in the prevention, diagnosis, and treatment of life-threatening illnesses. The UK Biobank is available to all international healthcare researchers. Could similar large-scale open data initiatives be implemented in education to support development and innovation? To do so would obviously require sustainable commitment and cooperation of both the public and private funders. In addition, all of the issues being raised about the use of data-intensive AI approaches in other sectors, including concerns over data bias, prediction accuracy, we're talking about false positives and false negatives, and data security are relevant for the education sector as well. The question then becomes, how can we address these concerns without limiting the potential of AI to improve educational outcomes? To gain public trust, it may begin with discussions about establishing industry standards for the disclosure of product performance by vendors, including information such as the limitation and accuracies of the prediction models, the consequences of inaccurate decisions for students and teachers, and how the models were trained, including details of the data sets used and how the learned models were evaluated for potential bias. As evidenced by these recent headlines from this year about data breaches and concerns about facial recognition technologies being used by police departments, these concerns are real, are currently influencing the policy debate, and will likely have implications for the use of AI in education. And so that is the end of the presentation portion. I'll turn it over to Lewis in the Q&A portion of the webinar. On this last slide is a citation, a reference for my paper published earlier this year. It's free to download if you're interested. And I'll turn it over to Lewis now.
Where is that citation? I think maybe we don't see your last slide yet.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, it should be up now. It says Q&A.
Okay. Hopefully we'll see it shortly. So thank you, Bob. So you talked about the potential impact of AI in education, and as we know, there's been a long history of technologies that have been touted as being potential revolutionizers of education. You know, at one time, for example, people believed that interactive video discs would revolutionize education. More recently, you know, there have been school systems say, well, let's give every student an iPad, and that will revolutionize education. So compared to those quote unquote disruptive innovations, where do you see AI sitting?
Again, I don't see, I wouldn't use, my expectation is not a disruption. My view on it is that there'll be incremental improvements to instruction, and in a number of areas, like I mentioned, differentiated instruction for discrete activities around productive practice opportunities for students to work at their own pace and get immediate feedback in practice environments, including homework. I see the early warning systems improving, getting better over time. I can see potentially teachers being able to assign more extended writing projects because because students are able to get automated feedback on their writing, and it's less of a burden on teachers, so making it more possible. So I see the improvements as incremental, you know, more than you know, a disruption, like, you know, is being you know, discussed in other fields outside of education.
Okay. If anyone has questions, type them in the chat window, and we'll address them in the Q&A. One issue that comes up is the question, well, how can we trust these AI systems? How do we know that they're making good recommendations? What are your thoughts about how to enhance the trust of AI-driven learning systems?
Yeah, I mean, I think more research on this sort of on this issue, in terms of looking at their prediction accuracy. I mean, it's these systems are so new, and this line of research is new. So I think, you know, it's all relative. The reference point is the current status quo without the systems. Sometimes that's a simpler version of the system, as in maybe in early warning systems, but oftentimes it's the teacher. You know, it's the teacher who is in their decision making that is the reference point, the contrast. And so and it's trust in systems. I guess across the board, even in adaptive instruction, it's just a knowing within these systems, how many pathways are there really in the adaptive instruction? Are there just two for advanced students and less advanced students, or is there really as many pathways as there are students? So in some, as we get into this research, some of it will be transparency around the design and the operation of these systems, and then comparing their predictions to you know, the counterfactual of the instructional environment without these systems. So, you know, in one way is more research. I'll tell you what's you know, what's going to AI is going to be influenced by trust issues in education, by trust issues outside of education. So the extent to which systems improve in the criminal justice system and the hiring and data bias issues are addressed there, because that's where media is paying attention. And those media stories on trust issues in systems outside of education are going to influence the public's view of trust in the education field.
So you talk about the potential of adaptive instruction technology, and you also talked about the importance of AI as for helping teachers. And you know, there's a potential risk, and there have been some instances that have been reported where actually adaptive learning systems can make it harder for teachers because each student is off doing their own thing, and so that makes it harder for the teacher to manage the class and provide overall coherence. What are your thoughts about how to avoid those pitfalls?
Yeah, okay. I think those problems get enhanced when you're in a classroom environment where the adaptive, personalized instruction is the core instructional component of the class, or maybe an entire school. So you have all students who are on their own, have their own learning plan, and are progressing at their own pace. That's not my vision of the use of these adaptive instructional platforms that I discussed today. My vision is that they be used in a blended instructional environment where teachers are leading the instruction and then using these systems during practice activities, during remediation activities, perhaps for some students while other students are doing another activity, or you know, for those students who are really advanced and ready to move on into the curriculum, giving them opportunities to explore new content while the teacher is working one-on-one or in small groups with other students in the class. So I see these adaptive and then bringing everybody back together. So I see these adaptive instructional platforms, I see the biggest role for them in giving students extra opportunities for productive practice, which includes going at their own pace, allowing them to fill in gaps when they need to, return to instruction, skip things they don't need to practice as much, but importantly, getting immediate feedback in those practice environments, and in some cases, additional coaching, depending on the system. But as we know, a lot of times in the practice environments, practice activities, whether it's worksheets in school or end of the unit homework problems for homework, a lot of students aren't getting any feedback on their homework or on their practice. And these environments at minimum allow students to get feedback to hopefully make that practice time more productive in ways that it's not possible for a single teacher to provide that level of instruction and feedback.
In your research, have you looked at how different states and countries are adopting AI and implementing policies in support of AI-driven education? Are there particular states or countries that we could all learn from in terms of adoption of AI-driven education?
I think we're too early. I really think we're too early. Of course, there's a lot of adaptive instructional platforms out there, you know, that are using the digital data generated by the platforms to improve what they're doing. A lot of that is internal to the systems. Certainly, the EU's policies around data privacy and protections are, are going to be obstacles to developers who, and these, frankly, the sharing of these open databases, large digital data sets that are being available to developers like the Google Open Images or the UK Biobank. It'd be interesting, particularly the UK Biobank, to look to other fields to see what policies are supporting the development of the UK Biobank, where 500,000 UK residents have offered to give that research initiative longitudinal data set, and then allowing that data to be open and available to health researchers in order to develop new innovations. And this is an environment in Europe who, some say is even more stringent and has more regulations around data privacy than we do in the U.S. So I think it'd be interested to learn from other fields outside of education, where we do have some open development initiatives happening.
A concern that's sometimes raised about AI-driven systems, particularly essay scoring systems, is the potential to game them. For example, for some of the essay scoring systems, you can give them some gibberish with a lot of fancy words in it, and you'll get a high essay score. What are your thoughts of how to make AI-driven systems resistant to that type of gaming?
Well, a couple of things. I think, it depends on the system and its goals. I mean, that may be that's a bigger issue, for instance, for the E-rater, right? Where it's a high stakes test. It's an SAT GRE, part of the SAT GRE. And so that's a much bigger issue for the E-rater. That is not providing feedback to the students. So, something like WriteLab that was designed for teachers to provide feedback to students on early drafts, and with the teacher grading and providing feedback on the later drafts and final drafts, it's in no interest to the teacher. The feedback is for the student. So there's no sort of, there's no motive for the student in that case to sort of game the system, because they're not benefiting from feedback on gibberish. It might be fun. It might be fun to hack. We know there's always going to be teenagers and adults who are going to want to try to fool these systems. But I think it just depends on the in a high stakes test. Yeah, that's going to be an issue, and you're going to have to detect, have better systems that are less susceptible for those types of deceptive, hacks, in a sense. Mm-hmm. But I think if the goal is to provide feedback to the student to improve their writing rather than as high stakes scores, you take out that motivation. Other than, some students just like to mess around.
Right. And a criticism that's sometimes raised about AI-driven systems is that if the AI is making the decisions of what the student should do and what the student should learn, what exercise they should focus on, it kind of takes the challenge away, and the students might, on one hand, they might lose the skills of learning how to learn. They also might lack the, if you will, the persistence that's required in order to succeed. What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, this came up yesterday as well. I just, my own sense of it is that that's a design issue for the curriculum. I think there's nothing inherent in the notion or the principles of adaptive instruction that eliminates productive struggle within the design of the program. I think good adaptive programs will allow students to struggle, and in most programs that I've studied, have the opportunity for students to um, um, uh, answer a problem wrong, and then retry that problem. Sometimes getting hints along the way, sometimes having pointers to additional resources, including the ability to review material before they try again. But and whether students use those extra resources is up to them. But I think that's sort of just part of the that's an instructional design issue, and not really an issue of technology or the principle of adaptive instruction. I think good, well-designed programs will include the opportunities for what we call productive struggle, that the students are forced to sort of rethink their steps and potentially review material. I always say, the alternative is not having any feedback at all, right? I said, so the worst case scenario is a student enters a practice activity or a homework activity. They answer every problem incorrectly, and they have no knowledge that they're doing, they're answering incorrectly. Pass that assignment in, and maybe 2 days later, 3 days later, maybe never get feedback on that they got the problem wrong, and what they might need to work on. So that's the alternative scenario. And I guess, there's no question there may be concern about lack of resiliency or that, but you have to weigh that against, due to adaptive, you have to weigh that against having potentially no feedback on something they might be completely unaware they're not proficient at.
Okay, well, we're at the end of our time, so thank you very much, Bob. And as a reminder to everybody, we will be posting a recording of this webinar on YouTube. You can find this recording of this webinar as well as the previous webinars on the Alelo website. So pass that on to your friends and encourage them to join us for our next webinars. So until then, thank everybody, and bye-bye for now.